in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University from 2013-14 academic year. This program that is called Classroom to Common Man, we also call it Faculty Brain for Social Gain, and we also call it University to People, and we also term it as Beyond Classroom program. Besides what we teach in the classroom, what is that we can do outside classroom along with our students. So this is the overall concept about next. And this is the vision we have created for this is called People's University. And any university in the country, in the state, should address to the problems of the people because the people are the stakeholders of any institution set up by the government. So universities are also accountable to people. Hence I call it People's University. And this is the belief, whatever vision I have created here, I have kept for my university, is that vision itself is our belief. As Lalita Madam was asking us yesterday, you speak in terms of belief, principles and all those things. Next. And this is also, we call it public interface program. And this is what is called BRUAU linkages. And the university, we have 20-point program of Government of India. And we have now 7 missions of Andhra Pradesh. And we have Bharat Nirman program. Almost all the content of these 7 missions are Bharat Nirman or 20-point program. They are almost of similar nature. And all the issues involved in these programs, mainly aim at people's welfare, upliftment of welfare, or development of the economy or the society. So what I tried here is, our university aims at poverty eradication and improve quality of life of the poor and underprivileged within the university area. So within the university area, we have about some 20 mandals and about more than 300 villages are there. And our Honorable Chief Minister has given us a task, that is primary sector mission. That is one of the 7 missions. So almost all the 17 departments in our university are aiming at how to make the farmer a smiling farmer. Nowadays we find weeping farmers, and we want to make them smiling farmers. And if all the inputs, if all the departments in the university come together, aiming at the welfare of the farmer, by using their faculty inputs, how they can use their faculty inputs also I will be explaining at a later point. And this is what I want to say. Next. And you see, these are the various developmental programs. Almost all 20-point program points are given here. Poverty eradication, power to people, support to farmers, labor welfare, food security, clean drinking water, housing for all, health for all, IT enabled and e-governance also, that is the 20th point in the 20-point formula. So almost everything. It's almost like a Bible or Ramayana or Mahabharata. Almost every development program or schemes of the government, come under these things only. And what I want all of you is, let us now think about how to integrate our university faculty or students functioning or departments functioning with the implementational aspects of these programs from the government side. Next. This I have already explained to you. So study and practice, this is the main point I want to highlight here, study and practice. So whatever students study within the classroom, they should be able to practically do such things outside the classroom also. That is the main point I would like to highlight here. Next. So study and practice, practice and experience, experience and enlighten and empower. And we call these things as principles. I think Lalita Madam has come. So the principles, study and practice, practice and experience and enlighten and empower. Next. So here some of the concerns I want to put before all of you. And you can see the first point here. Can we make a conscious move from volume to value? We are producing number of graduates, postgraduates, but what is their value? What is their worth? It is something, a big question mark. And I'm also very skeptical about the gross enrollment ratio, which is at present is 20%, set to be 20%, and it is going to be enhanced to 40%. It's a very good objective, but my apprehension is if you just increase the volume, you may be producing 40% number of graduates and postgraduates, but what does it mean? If it is not properly supported by, if it is not correspondingly, supported by the quality of teaching teachers and number of teachers and in terms of infrastructure, and there is a mismatch between, you can produce even nowadays what we are doing, we are producing more engineering graduates. But hardly 5% of the engineering graduates produced, they have that market value. And the remaining 95% are on the roads, or they are working in some other small things, they are satisfied with small jobs. Actually, the amount of investment we are making in an engineering graduate or a medical engineering graduate is not felt by the society. Or even that engineering graduate is also not able to reap the benefits of his own certificate. So what does it mean? So this is a warning here. The warning here is, no doubt we should increase the GER, but at the same time, it should not lead to other problems like less quality or less worthiness, all such things. So the other things also have to be taken care of. So volume to, so we have to move from volume to value. And another thing here is, can universities be confined to mere production of graduates and postgraduates? And my another concern is, can we reduce pain and sorrow of the poverty stricken by the care and concern of the research support systems? So we have a lot of research support systems in the university. And we are giving PhD samples, so many things. But what is the end value of this PhD? And this is something that we have to ponder over. It's a big question mark. And that fellow who is getting doctorate, he is becomes a doctor, just he put doctor before his name. But what kind of panacea, what kind of problem he has solved, for what? For which purpose he is given the doctorate? And any doctorate, any that has to be given, only on the basis of problem solving kind of methodology. Problem solving means, suppose when a patient goes to a doctor, the doctor gives medicine and the patient gets relief. And similarly, when a particular student joined for research, he should be able to give some kind of solution to some of the problems faced by the society. If that is not done, if it is just mere typing and binding and handing over submission and getting doctorate, it is a document or certificate, so doctorate does not have any sense at all. So what I mean to say that, we should also think in this knowledge commission, all members are requested to please try to impress upon our colleagues in the universities and colleges and how to go about this kind of things. Next, so this is universities to people concept, and these are the features. Faculty expertise to the doorsteps of common man, and translation of theory and concept into action outside university, and utility-based research. This is the point I was telling you. And this interdisciplinary approach to solve people's problems. The last point is very important. Interdisciplinary approach. In our university, so we have geosciences department, we have biotechnology, and we have organic chemistry, and we have law department. Like that, we have several departments. And what I used to do, see, we draw students, 2-3 students from biotechnology, 2-3 students from social work, 2-3 students from organic chemistry, and 2-3 students from other departments, depending upon the nature of the problem. we form an interdisciplinary team and we send that team to the village. The biotechnology people will study the water quality in that area. The geoscience students will study the soil health management aspects. And organic chemistry people will contact the farmers and they will try to, they will collect the samples of the fertilizers, pesticides they use and take them to university lab and test them and give the findings to the agriculture department of the district administration. And accordingly, they will also give some suggestions whether to ban that pesticide or fertilizer from the next Kharif season. Or if it is okay, then we will also give the same kind of report to the JD Agriculture. This can be continued. And this is further, and our findings are further verified by JD Agriculture also. And like that, we are trying to facilitate the district administration through our manpower and involvement and students' involvement, faculty involvement, like that. Next. And this is a very long, when I was in Anantapur, SK University as professor, I was collecting certain complaints from farmers on adulterated pesticides purchased by them. Next one. And how to gear up good governance through universities, this is the point here. But any change management will not come so easily. Before implementing this concept, this university to people concept, what I did, I convened the meetings of, I conducted several workshops separately for students and impressing them upon the need for their involvement in the mitigation of social problems, because Srikakulam is a very backward area. It's a rural area, and university also is located in a very backward area, in a backward district like Srikakulam. So it is the students' responsibility. So what I used to do, I tell the students, almost all 90% of my students in that university belong to small or marginal farmers. That's a very vulnerable group of the population. And I tell them, you see, I will give you 25 marks. You bring some soil from your father's land and you bring some water of your village to our university lab. Or you report some other problem, suppose some Bangar Talli program is there or Mayati Mahalakshmi is there. If you find some pregnant woman delivered a girl child, you bring the statistics and give it to the social work department. They will pursue the matter and see that benefits are passed on to the particular family. And this is how, the feeling of belongingness I have created among the students. I never told them that this is another examination or this is another extra work for you. See, this is for your own kith and kin, for your own family members, for your own upliftment of your own, development of your own village. We have to do this activity. And this is how I could get their participatory kind of things. Instead of I didn't face much difficulty in convincing my students for this kind of activity. And study and implement within the university jurisdiction and generating eagerness to correlate the realities beyond classroom and tuning syllabi based on community needs. This is what we have done. So the type of problems we are facing in Srikakulam district and the kind of departments we have in the university campus and also the syllabus and the board of studies, we discuss all these issues. And the 20% margin is there. We can do some changes. And within the 20%, I could do all these things. And making everyone part of solution instead of problem. I told the students, see, we should not, everybody tells about problems, but nobody comes forth with any solution. So, but now we start with a solution, not problem. The problems are already known to each and everyone. But how to generate solutions, let us think about. So like that, I convinced my students through brainstorming sessions. And also making students and faculty feel part of the governance. See, universities are not isolated from government. Though, we think about universities, autonomy, independence and all those things, but universities are part of the society, they are part of the constitution, they are part of the governance. And unfortunately, we are not thinking in terms of governance. And what are the intentions of the government? And what are the expectations of the people? There is a lot of gap. between the government intentions and people's expectations. Whether we as university or college faculty, can we bridge up that gap? Can we bridge up that gap? So this is my endeavor here. This is the experiment I did. Next one. And also this is very much within the overall guidelines of UGC also. You see the last point. Coordinating UGC guidelines on faculty extension within India's national policy on the voluntary sector 2006. So in 2006, certain guidelines were issued by UGC also. It is not that government asks you to do it. It is the faculty and the students, it is for the universities to come forward voluntarily and take up such issues and involve themselves in upholding the values in the society or in mitigating the sufferings of the people in the society. Next. And these are the various departments we have in our university. What's a university role? Dr. BRAU departments I have given here. Next. And you see how I have linked up each department to different activities. For example, you take English department. This is skill development centers we are now planning. And our PG students, they go to villages. They go to junior colleges located in the rural areas. Of course, entire Srikakulam is a rural area. And they go to junior colleges and they also go to first year degree students. And every PG student of English department of our university has to work not less than 15 hours. He has to deliver 15 hours of lecture. He has to teach antonyms, synonyms, active voice, passive voice, basics of English grammar. This is what is called comprehensive passages. All such things which we find in all competitive examinations. So for this what we give, we have about 8 faculty members in the department, English department, and 40 students are there. And 8 into 5 and 40. So one guide will be, one faculty will act as guide. Under him 8 students will be there. So these 8 students are given complete study material about the aspects which I have told you now about English. And they prepare themselves first. And so TOT I conduct within the department by the faculty themselves. And then they will be deployed to different colleges. And they work for 15 hours and they have to report back. And the feedback also we take from the students to whom these people have taught. And also feedback we take from the principals of those colleges where our students have gone and taught these classes. And we are giving some marks also for that. Like that, maths department, same problem. In maths also, a lot of maths phobia is there among the 10th class students and junior college students. And so our maths students will go and do the similar activity in degree colleges, especially in intermediate. And they go and teach, what they teach, analytical reasoning, mathematical reasoning, arithmetic reasoning, certain statistical methods. These are the things which are normally found in the competitive examinations. So our students are preparing and they are also telling others. So it is a double-edged advantage. So this is how, I am keeping all my students to be ready for acquiring knowledge and use it for the sake of others and also for themselves. You take this public administration department. And this is feedback on government schemes, studies on delivery gaps, policy initiatives, and send alerts. In case of public administration, this is the students of public administration, Suppose government announces some new schemes. And they immediately take up those, suppose Janadhan Yojana program. Or we have this Mayinti Mahalakshmi program. Or we have Janasri Bhima Yojana program. So all such programs, they will be studied by our students of public administration, and they will conduct a small survey also at the time of, that is, and once the program is announced and it is under implementation, we give immediate feedback to the district collector about how and where these gaps are existing. Sir, you announced this program, but some people are not getting any benefits under this scheme. So our students will even go and submit on grievances day Monday to the collector about the problems they have collected from villages. And collector is endorsing those problems to the concerned officers to be addressed to. So this is one kind of involvement. And coming to Telugu department, you see, this is the programs and dissemination of information in local accent, local rural accent on various welfare initiatives of the government. So they do conduct Kala Jatas, some Janapada kind of things, and some small street plays. And for example, on open defecation, we have a small drama troupe in the university. So they go to villages and they do play that. They demo on certain occasions. So like that, you know, the students of Telugu department also, they are even spending some time, even night, they are staying overnight in the villages. And those people who cannot sign, సంతకాలు రాని వాళ్ళకి కూడా సంతకాలు నేర్పుతున్నారు. రీసెంట్లీ ఈ ఆధార్ సీడింగ్లో ఏమవుతుందో ప్రాబ్లము, ఈ థమ్స్ పనిచేయటం లేదు కొంతమందికి. దట్ ఈస్ అ ప్రాబ్లం because of age factor and so many things, particularly the manual labor. That machine is now not accepting the things. And we identified 250 such people, and వాళ్ళకి సంతకాలు నేర్పారు మా తెలుగు డిపార్ట్మెంట్ స్టూడెంట్స్, రామయ్య, సీతమ్మ, it like that. Just only 3. So they spent some time. 250 people ఆధార్ సీడింగ్ లింక్ చేసాము తీసుకెళ్ళి. So they felt so much. No, because what? No, after classroom, after class work is over. Yeah, not daily, madam. On Saturdays and Sundays. Sunday is again a day. Yeah, yes. And for convenience sake, what we have done, you know, we have chosen nearby villages so that they can reach the hostel, have their food, and go back again to village. Yeah. That under the guidance of a teacher. And we have the phone numbers of all sarpanches, and we tell the sarpanch that so and so our students are coming, you please take care. So five students, madam. No, not like that, madam. No. Ledu. Yeah, you know, see, we have 40 students, for example, in a class. If 40 students are divided into 8 groups, each group comprising 5 students, headed by 1 faculty. And in case faculty is not able to accompany, I tell the sarpanch of the village. So he will meet their hospitality also. So we are not incurring any expenditure. And for these students also are getting marks, 25. I am giving 1 credit for this social work. So this is how they are doing. Similarly, special education department, and they are dealing with differently abled children, adult education. Yeah. So same thing, you know. So for example, history department, library science and information department is there. They are working in liaison with the DPRO of the district administration, library science and information department. All government schemes, whatever they are there. And we are going, our teams go along with the DPRO teams, and in fact DPRO, there is staff shortage. So here our students will do that job for their own sake to get their credits. And similarly, history department, for example, liaison with the district tourism officer, archaeology department, DPRO, and non-government organizations. And we have, in Srikakulam, historical Buddhist sites are there, so many pilgrim tourist centers are there, and our students will go and act as guides. So he has to work at least for 15 hours as a guide. And suppose during Arasavalli, that big gathering, occasions, our students will go and act as guides, and they explain about the importance of tourism, and they take care of the domestic tourist or foreign tourist, and they guide him in all aspects. Next one, we have law department, you know. In case of law department, liaison with district legal aid authority, and legal education, legal aid, consumer awareness, protection, and all such things are being taken care of. You take up the social work department of our university. They are dealing with health, nutrition, sanitation, linkage of insurance schemes for unorganized labor, anti-drug and de-addiction activities also they are conducting in the villages. And we have Department of Computer Science, madam. This Department of Computer Science, is something like this Aadhaar card. We have opened an Aadhaar card, our Computer Science department. We opened one Aadhaar Reading Center in the university itself, and the villages nearby, we made Echarla as a zero, a problem village as far as Aadhaar seeding is concerned, with the active involvement of our students. And similarly, Waters Enrollment Program also, our computer science students are actively involved, and they nearly enrolled 1,600 new waters within the Echarla Mandal. I have done it just on an experimental basis. This has to be extended to other areas, other villages in the district also. And like this, we have Rural Development Department. And, and our Rural Development and Economics Department people, they are forming Dwakra groups, they are monitoring Dwakra groups, they are also establishing the bank linkages, and like that they are doing. So, this is another activity. And also under Janadhan Yojana program also, our students opened 25,000 bank accounts. And here I have involved many departments, not one department, RD and economics and social work department. So all such departments, I conducted some workshops for them, I established some relationship with the bankers, they have gone into villages, and 25,000 accounts also we have opened. And we received special appreciation from the Department of Finance, Ministry of Finance, Government of India for this kind of initiative. And it was also witnessed by our state BJP President, Professor Haribabu Garu, Andhra University, earlier professor, and he was also MP, he is also MP of Visakhapatnam district. And next one, go quick. So like this, zoology department, botany department, geosciences department, chemistry, organic chemistry, instrumentation, all departments, they are engaged for some kind of this thing. For example, you take geosciences department, you can circulate it. I will just, next one. Next one. This is what is called public welfare through ID convergence, interdisciplinary convergence. This is the point I already explained. Next one. So I have also given here certain models of convergence, how different departments can come together aiming at a particular objective. How botany, zoology, rural development departments can converge to promote and advise on bio-village model of soil healthcare, water harvesting, crop diversification, introduction of improved post-harvest technology, all such things. You go fast, go fast. Yes, you can see these things. RD, social work, economics. Similarly, law and commerce. Next one, next one, next one. No, this is the action plan. Yes, this is important. Go to the previous one, previous slide. I think I will end up here. Action plan. So this is how we implemented this particular activity. So we have identified certain problems as per the priorities of the government under different things. And we are giving 25 marks in each semester. 25 marks means 1 credit. 4 semesters, 4 into 25, 100 marks, 4 credits we are giving for this kind of activity. And each student has to work 1 week clubbed with holidays outside campus in a village per semester. And we form student groups on an interdisciplinary mode. And the last point is very important, madam. My dear friends, you please see this. Last point, evaluation is not done by faculty. Faculty only will witness, but evaluation is done by the beneficiary. Yeah. And whoever is the beneficiary under the particular government scheme and which is licensed by our students, they have to come and give votes for that. And the sarpanch of the village also will put his signature on the seminar theme submitted by the student. So this is again completely people's participation and students' participation, faculty interventions, and this kind of activity we are doing. Next one. I just show you one slide. Suppose you see this Department of Computer Science. Go. And our government's priority is now IT enabled and e-governance. And under this, the services provided to the public in the panchayat so as to strengthen IT-enabled and e-governance services. And most of the computers are lying idle in villages, in sarpanch areas, in village areas. So, show one more photo, that is the last thing. So this is how we are trying to do it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I am stopping. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I know
the government of Andhra Pradesh for having invited me as a member on the advisory, council that you all have set up. We've always looked at Andhra Pradesh as one of the most progressive states, and we of course applaud the efforts of the Honorable Chief Minister for what he has done earlier, and obviously what he is going to do now. So I think it's not just we who are watching him, but it's the world who's watching him, because he's known internationally as well. Andhra Pradesh has been a progressive state and more known as an IT hub, and therefore Andhra Pradesh and technology almost go hand in hand. In fact, Symbiosis set up a campus, much before the state split, and we are now in Telangana, and hopefully we will also be in your state, in Andhra Pradesh. Nevertheless, I'll speak a little bit about Symbiosis, because that will give a perspective of about how a university or an institution can evolve, going by a typical case study of Symbiosis for some of the educationists who are there in the audience. And I will also speak about how, I envision Andhra Pradesh into becoming an education hub. Though, of course, I represent the state of Maharashtra, but, with not so much of a political will of converting this state, we may as well rely on one of the progressive states in the country, which is Andhra Pradesh. My father set up Symbiosis, as a small organization in 1971, 44 years ago. And this he set up not to form a university, but with a very small dream of doing something for foreign students who came to the city of Pune. So he was a professor of botany in Fergusson College, one of the oldest colleges in the city of Pune. And he was also the rector of the boys' hostel. And I'll tell you a little story in very short words, so that I don't take up much time. So while he was a rector of the boys' hostel, our house was just opposite this boys' hostel. And he would see one girl wearing a skirt coming every day to the window of, this hostel room and passing something through the window to her so-called boyfriend. So this happened almost for 7 days. And as curiosity would arise in the mind of any rector, he went into the hostel to, actually scold this boy. And when he walked into the room, he saw a boy lying on bed, very frail, weak. And when my father started scolding him and asking him questions, he started crying. And he said, I'm a student who I've come from Mauritius, and I'm suffering from jaundice. It is Diwali vacation, and all my Indian friends have gone back home. And she's my sister who brings home-cooked food. And because she cannot enter the boys' hostel, she passes this tiffin through the window. And this one incident actually shook my father emotionally, and he started talking to more and more foreign students who came to the city for education. And then he realized that these foreign students actually carry more ill will than goodwill back home to their countries. And this happens because the citizens of the Pune city were not willing to accept foreigners, were not willing to accept foreign students. So there were stories told by Nigerian students and some of the other African students stating that because their color is black, even if a seat next to, while traveling in a bus, next to him is vacant, no girl or boy would want to sit next to him. Similarly, in the morning, they would not want to see the black boy's face in a hostel room while he walked to the toilet. So these were horrendous stories that they carried back home, and my father believed that something needs to be done, and therefore Symbiosis was established. Symbiosis, a botanical terminology, meaning living together of two different organisms for mutual interdependence. And therefore, the establishment of Symbiosis has been on the ethos of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the world is one family. So we believe that students coming from different states of India, from different parts of the world, are our own. And there are no longer any geographical boundaries that define countries, but it is these emotional boundaries that actually should bring people from all over the world together. And no better place than a university campus. And therefore, internationalization is very deep in our DNA. That's what all of us say. And therefore, we've done a lot of things, so that our university is called as a Symbiosis International University. So it's not just attracting foreign students, but actually internationalization in every process, be it designing curricula, be it collaboration with universities, be it bringing foreign professors to the campus, be it sending Indian students on exchange programs, be it a Study India program to attract, students from the developed countries, or designing a global immersion program to send Indian students to other countries, the cultural thrill of the other countries, or inculcating foreign language as one of the languages in the curriculum. Several things towards internationalization is what we've done. But apart from internationalization, as a university, the focus has always been on quality and excellence, and which we don't compromise. So whether it is admissions, which are done totally on merit, or it is recruitment of teachers without compromising from which region, which religion they come from, it's always merit and excellence that is looked at. And therefore, everything that we do, we ensure there is excellence, even if it is creating infrastructure. If you I would actually wish that some of you can visit our campus in a district called Madipalli, which is near Hyderabad in Telangana state. It is state-of-the-art infrastructure. So there is no compromise on quality, be it infrastructure, be it students, be it teachers, be it non-teaching staff, or anything that we do in the university. And I think this pays and a lot, and therefore I think whatever name and identity that Symbiosis has is because of this quality and excellence that we've always imbibed in each one of us and in each of the processes. The second thing is that it's a very ethically run university, very transparent. All decisions are taken by discussions and deliberations, and there is never a top-down approach, but it is, a bottom-up approach where discussions happen through students, through faculty, through non-teaching staff, and the leadership actually looks at all the views of the various stakeholders, including the alumni. And I think that is also something that is unique. Otherwise, most of the times, privately run universities are managed, from a top-down approach and never a bottoms-up approach. And I think all this has helped Symbiosis to establish its identity. And therefore, we've been wanting to actually attract, students from different states and different parts of the world. Towards faculty, we have a very strong focus on the teaching learning process. So we have a Symbiosis Center for Teaching and Learning where continuous faculty development programs are organized. There is a Symbiosis Center for Research and Innovation, which drives and motivates and encourages faculty to do research and to publish papers. There is an innovation drive to ensure that students don't run after placements and employment, but become entrepreneurs through the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. There is a very strong focus on skill development, which is a part of the university, and of course a very strong focus on industry, academia, partnership, etc. And I'm trying to bring all these things that we do into what Andhra Pradesh can do. We are too small, of course, to even say this, but I just felt that, whatever we do in our university, if a state like Andhra Pradesh decides to do, I think it will be able to project itself as an education hub. So while looking at, how do you build institutions in the state of Andhra Pradesh, or how do you create Andhra Pradesh into an education hub, I thought, let us first do a SWOT analysis of, what Andhra Pradesh is like. And I'm looking at it from another angle, from a third-person angle. I'm sure you all have done a SWOT analysis of your state. But when I look at it as an outsider, I feel that the strengths are that, you have a very progressive chief minister. Because unless the leadership is progressive, the leadership is internationally and nationally known. A leadership which is willing to talk and discuss with stakeholders like this two-day conference that you have organized. I think that's something that is going to define the future of the state. So you have a very progressive image of your chief minister and of course other people who govern the state. Then there are institutions of repute like the ISB, which was of course set up by your chief minister, and which is a wonderful collaborative example of what an institution should be. you have a very strong presence of being an IT and a technology hub. So whether it's computer science, information technology, or for that matter engineering, Andhra Pradesh is known for technology, and a very strong Indian diaspora. I guess you're the third largest contributor. That's what I've read somewhere. To the Indian diaspora hub that is all across the world. So I think these are real good strengths that a state already has. If you look at some of the weaknesses that I perceive, this is a new state trying to create a new identity. Now, this actually can be a weakness, but if I would take it, it can be a great strength because, as a new identity, creating a new identity, you can do several things and you don't have, a baggage to carry forward. So it can be a weakness, it can be a strength. Unfortunately, some of the best known institutions in the earlier state of Andhra Pradesh, I think many of them have gone to Telangana and few have remained.
I'm very happy to meet you, even though it is in this form. I don't know if I'm still on or not. I see the screen is frozen. Okay. Can you please tilt the camera so I can see everyone? To be able to speak to you, although it is in this mode, which is not the most optimal. As Shanti said, that I was asked to speak on these couple of topics, and I first wanted to share our experience and some of the discussions that we have been having in the Terry University on faculty development in particular. As you are well aware, the Terry University is a relatively young institution. We have been in operation for about 15 years now. And the second thing is that it is, of course, a research university focused on postgraduate education. The third thing is that we are focused completely on sustainability studies. We run MTech programs in urban development and management, in renewable energy engineering and management. We run MSc programs on climate science and policy, on environmental studies and resources management. There's another MTech program that we have on water science and governance. So very clearly keeping away from the engineering aspects on this particular program. So essentially our approach has been to see what we identify as some of the major emerging challenges in the country, and definitely sustainable development is one key such area. And then we have looked at what is it that we need from the point of view of human capacities to be able to address the particular challenge. So here again, sustainability studies is something that we focused on, which is essentially talking about the multidisciplinary approach. So for us, the biggest problem was that if we want our students to have this multidisciplinary approach and then to be able to go out into the world and create systemic solutions to be able to solve these sustainability challenges, the faculty would have to be sensitive also to the same kind of multidisciplinarity which is essential. And by the way, this is not something which is unique to the Terry University. A number of other universities, especially internationally, that are focused on sustainability studies are also grappling with the same challenges. So for us, the bigger challenge, apart from the fact that India in general is short of faculty resources, is this unique core of people that we are looking for that would be sensitive to sustainability subjects. And turn off the mic because understand the question. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better. So can I continue, Shanti, or is there something you want to say? Okay. So so this faculty that we were looking for also had to of what the role of disciplines was in providing these solutions. So People needed to be aware of, how social issues, social interactions, community perceptions played out a role along with the engineering solutions that we were looking at. How science and engineering interact with each other. How did regulatory issues and economics have an influence on, for example, we are looking at yeah. Sure, that's fine. Yeah, so I was talking about the fact that, faculty members to have a deep degree of understanding and respect for what other disciplines brought to the sustainability solutions that we were looking at. So with this kind of a background of shortages, at any time you want me to stop, Shanti, just give me an indication. Uh, so not only was there a challenge in terms of availability of faculty, but availability of this special kind of faculty that we needed for our purposes. For a state like Andhra Pradesh that is looking at, moving ahead, creating a number of more institutions, new institutions apart from the existing institutions that there are, I think it is critically important that we keep in mind the core of resources that we need for the future. So when we talk about economic development of the state, when we talk about creating jobs, we need to be very clear in which areas do we want to prioritize and work towards this kind of a strategic plan that would allow us to identify where is it that we want people. And then we can basically take a look at what kinds of faculty that we have and where do developments need to take place and what kinds of new faculty we would like to put in place. So my perception is that we need to first start also by looking at the kinds of PhD programs that we are running that would yield us the kinds of faculty members that we need for the future. And these PhD programs should be attractive so that you get the best people. One of the biggest challenges that we are also having in the education sector, which I'm sure you will agree with me, is that a lot of our young people today are heading off to better economic opportunities in consulting firms, in industry, and so on and so forth. And not the best and the brightest are coming into the academic. So how do you increase the attractiveness of PhD programs? How do you create postdoc opportunities so that the right kind of training is also done once you have completed your PhD? And how do you create a cadre of professionals from where we have a choice for purposes of taking on as faculty members? So that is one point I would really like to be able to stress. The second, of course, is that we need to have adequate numbers and we need to have a clear recognition of we need to have a clear recognition of the kinds of research opportunities. So PhD programs, postdoc opportunities, the numbers of faculty members that we are looking at, in which disciplines or fields or thematic areas. I think once we have a clearly laid out map on all of these, then the program has to be developed accordingly. The second major problem that we focused on in the Delhi University, and I'm mixing up my own experiences over here, is that we recognize that the students have access to a tremendous amount of learning resources. Can you switch off the mic? Okay. So, the students of this age have lots of access to computer-based resources, online courses that are being offered and developed by a number of institutions. So the key question to us is, what is it that a university is offering that they cannot get? Yes. Can you hear me? All right. So, okay. All right. I wasn't, well, let me see if I can pick it up again. But basically what I was saying was we need to be able to figure out, and this onus lies on faculty members to figure out, what is it that a university or a college or a classroom is providing to a student, which the student cannot access off the website, which the student cannot access off the online courses that are available and available at a very, very reasonable cost. So, and then especially for what, for a highly connected community, this is a major challenge that we have. And I think here, when we talk about faculty development, I think it is critically important that all faculty members are very comfortable with all the resources that are available to a student in the subject in which he or she is teaching, and are aware of all the resources that are available, and then to be able to see how do you build further from these resources that are available to the students. Today, I think if you look at the interactions in the classroom, a number of students tend to just go to the website and check on what a faculty member is saying or trying to teach in a classroom, and would like to contest the same as well. So there is this very aggressive, empowered, very demanding lot of students that I think the faculty members of today have to deal with. So it is essentially very important that we remain completely in tune and on par with the student community in terms of what is it that they have available to them and what is new that we can offer. So that is one part of this particular challenge. The second part of this challenge of a highly connected community is that the classroom then has to adopt pedagogical tools that leverage the activity-based information and knowledge that is available to students, that create a very constructive, open, debate, doubt students. So the pedagogy that we are going to offer in classrooms is going to be very important. One of the criticisms that we have of Indian students, and this is where industry and other employers are really very frustrated, is on what they call the employability of students. And when they talk about employability, they are definitely talking about the language, the communication, the presentation, the subject knowledge is typically there. But it is all of these other parameters and the very important point of critical thinking. How does a student analyze a particular situation? How are they questioning what is happening in the environment around them? How are they looking for solutions? Are they thinking out of the box? Is there something new? Is there a value addition? To what extent are they able to bring this value addition into a classroom? These are all parameters that go into what we call employability of students, and this is what people are looking for. So in the pedagogy that we adopt in a classroom, how do we get students to move away? And I'm talking here about at the higher education level. So if from the beginning they are being taught not to question adequately, not to engage in criticism, in questioning of faculty members, how do we break that mold? Second very, can you hear me? Is the second very critical aspect of this highly connected community that we are talking about. The third critical aspect over here is on evaluations. So not only do we have to change the pedagogy and the nature of interaction with students in a classroom, but how do we evaluate students and their performance? Do we want them to be learning and then reproducing in an examination? Or do we want them to be innovative? Do we want them again to reflect the same values that a potential employer is looking for in the students? So how do we set our examinations? How do we evaluate them? Do we move completely to open book and open resource kinds of exams? How do we structure this? Again, it depends on what is it that we want from the students. So we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the employer and look at what is it that we're looking for from a student and test the student for that. So that is on the evaluation part of it. On the evaluation, the other dimension that we had a very detailed discussion in our university, and I would love to have your feedback on that as well, is what is it that we are testing a student for, apart from what I mentioned earlier? Do we want to see how the student is comparing with the rest of his cohort? Or do we want to see how a student is performing vis-a-vis the entry point? When a student came into your program of study, how was that student and how far has he moved from where he was when he came in? So are you benchmarking the student with himself or herself? Are you benchmarking the student with the cohort? And what do these two systems of evaluation do to the confidence level of a student? I think it is very, very important that the student feels confident, feels proud of their achievements and what it is that they have done and what it is that they have achieved through the program of study that we are subjecting them to. So that was another thought that I thought I would share with you, and I would love to hear your feedback on that. Then of course is the whole area of faculty exchanges. And here again, I would like to share the experience that we have from Delhi University. We are very privileged, possibly because of the thematic focus that we have for our university on sustainable development, to have very strong relationships with some of the best universities in the world. We have a strong collaborative relationship with Columbia University in New York, with Yale University. Okay. And then with the Free University in Berlin, with Deakin University and Queensland University of Technology in Australia, with a university in France, etc. Large number of relationships in all of these universities that are interested, because at a global level we're talking about transforming the patterns of development, and they're all interested in it. So we have very good relationships. We have very limited relationships within the country, and somewhere I think that either our regulatory system or the incentives that we have in place do not seem to encourage this kind of exchange. So we don't have a double degree system, but what we are doing is we are, because we are a young university and we started exploring these relationships only 3-4 years ago, and relationships pretty much take some time to develop because people have to understand each other. So we are starting with looking at joint PhD programs at this point, and that we have with a couple of universities. Apart from the latest learning and understanding of culture, both the student and the PhD exchange programs is enabling the student to become a more globalized, some that fit in at any place in the world. And that is important for a country like India, that our students are able to interact and be on par with the best in the world. So these are the three things that we are currently looking at. We also have, joint curriculum that we have developed. So our water governance is a program where the curriculum was developed in consultation with university representatives from the SAARC region. So because we felt that water was a subject that was critically important to all countries of the region, and they needed to interact with each other. And also the student community and faculty interactions would meet a larger purpose of creating better diplomatic ties between our countries, because water is a contentious subject at hand. So there are different objectives and drivers relationships that we have. We've also been part of a global class initiative. And the program that we run there is called Sustainable Development Practice. And what we have there is really trying to create people that go out into areas in particular and engage in developmental activity. So apart from becoming their own entrepreneurs, setting up their own NGO, etc., this group of would have a community of people that they can interact with for grassroots level interventions and for rural development initiatives. So that was a program that again started in 10 universities across the world, and TERI University was one of the first 10. And now it is expanded to 20 or 25 universities across the world that are offering curriculum that is largely comparable. So the students can again move seamlessly across these different universities. So that was the other thing that I wanted to share. And before I move on, if there are any questions on this. Otherwise, I will make a couple of additional points. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. You know, a lot of what a PhD student does in terms of research is dependent also on the resources that are available for conducting the research, especially if it is on the hard science side. If it is on the policy and, on the economic or statistical analysis, then of course it's a different subject. For us, I think because we have focused on a subject in which we have good quality infrastructure, TERI has been in existence for 40 years, and we have very good biotech labs, nanobiotech labs, engineering labs, etc. Students have access to the best available research facilities, but also importantly, they are able to work with the researchers in TERI who are working on the most current subjects. So that access definitely helps the student. Apart from that, we have a requirement, and the students are very clear that their PhD thesis is going to stand international scrutiny. So we select the best expert internationally as the international examiner of the PhD thesis. So that is a very rigorous process that we go through, and students know that they are not going to get away with anything that is not going to pass international scrutiny. There is also a requirement, which is still a little low, that you have at least one published paper in an internationally accepted journal, but we want to increase that to 2, and we will over a period of time. But right now it is only 1. But I think it is more the examination pressure. We've also had 3 or 4 theses of our students in the last several years that have been turned down. And that again is a very, very important signal to send to students that you're not going to get a push. I mean, if it doesn't stand scrutiny, then you lose all your work. So, and plus the internal processes that we have as well of examination are very stringent. We follow the same system that exists in the IITs of having student research committees. And these research committees are generally quite demanding as far as the student goes and the processes, etc. So it's really about the pressure that we put on students, their deliverables beforehand. In an ideal situation, and we have not implemented this as well, but this is something that we are introducing now, students must have an internal defense before they are able to submit their thesis. And of course, the external examination is the most important part of it. They must go through that external examination. So I think it is really the extent of demand that we place on students and the pressure that we put on students that is, and the resources that we make available to them that is critically important. Sure. On the faculty side, I think retention is one of the biggest challenges that we have. I don't know what your experience has been. Because of the huge shortage of faculty members in the country, people tend to move from one place to another wherever it is possible. And they move for instances that some of us who have been in the sector and the research field for a very long time find surprising, which is the amount of flexibility that an institute offers. I think one of the most misunderstood terms in Indian academia, if I'm having spent 30 years in a research organization before moving to academics, is this term academic freedom. Academic freedom, I think, is interpreted to mean that I can do whatever I want. Nobody is going to ask me questions. There is a discipline issue which I think has to be maintained. Academic freedom is really about the thought process, about the fact that you are not indoctrinating anyone into a particular thought process. You allow people to explore and engage and follow their processes. It's not about whether you come 9 to 5 or whether you are following whatever disciplinary measures that might exist in an institution. So I think there is a large degree of misunderstanding, and I think we need to arrive at a common understanding. And it might be worthwhile for this eminent group which is sitting in this room to arrive at something that we all agree is what we mean by academic freedom and make it known across the state while we are in this process. Sir, did you have a question? Yeah. Ji. Ji. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, that's something that we have been grappling with. Part of the problem could be on our side because we have been so focused on these multidisciplinary studies. And maybe there was not that much of a match that we were looking at. It is possible that that could be a reason. But I think more importantly, it is the resources that are available, the financial resources to be able to support faculty exchange programs. For TERI, I can tell, because this is possibly not true for a number of other universities, we are a deemed university and we are an unaided institution. And we do not, that clause 12B that exists in the UGC regulations basically preempts us from receiving funds from the government for a number of activities that we want to do. So this could very well be a limitation on our side. However, we would like to be able to overcome this limitation because I believe that we would learn a lot from this kind of an interaction, and I think we can share our own experiences and what we are doing in terms of very, very innovative curriculum that we are developing with other universities as well. So I think there is a great opportunity. I agree with the approach. I agree with the approach. They tend to differentiate between one set of institutions and the set of institutions, create a barrier between institutions which is dedicated to the overall purpose of education. I don't know if it was or not. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yes. 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 May I, may I just, quickly add to that? We would love to do what TIFR is doing, except that, because we are again a non-governmental organization, there is differentiation that is there which acts as a barrier. Second, several of our faculty members go to other institutes in this region, of course, and lecture at those universities and institutions. Third, all the curriculum that we have developed is fully available on our website. It is there for anybody who would like to use it. We are not an institution that says that that gives only a broad profile and hides the details of the courses, etc. Every detail of the courses that we offer is available on our website for anybody to use, to see, to adapt as they think appropriate. So as far as possible, given our resource limitations, we try and be as open as possible and as participative as possible. But a little bit of help from governments, even though we are an independent deemed university, non-aided deemed university, etc., if they don't allow that to become a barrier, I'm sure that we would love to be able to, we are a small university all said and done, but we would love to be able to share whatever experiences that we have in a much more open and aggressive manner than we have been able to thus far. Right? The next point I wanted to come to very quickly was on this flexibility. And not a lot of, especially I think it is wonderful that a lot of teachers are also ladies, and ladies in particular have a number of demands on their time and require flexibility. So, but the question also remains that while we need to provide that flexibility, it should also balance with the need for performance. So I don't think that we have as yet arrived at a solution where the flexibility which is required and the performance that one would like to see on par with especially the male colleagues who do not have the same kinds of pressures. How do we balance this? And I think for this, we need to have a concerted session, a concerted discussion on how is it that we are going to be able to encourage it. Because I think there is tremendous value in being able to provide this kind of flexibility. Infrastructure, yes, we all know that infrastructure needs to be provided, so there's nothing new. How do we reward innovation in pedagogy? How do we create a competitive environment on pedagogy? This again is something that I think I would like to encourage, that as we are thinking through this whole process, we can come up with a system on keeping a clear focus on pedagogy and new pedagogical tools that we will need to develop, we need to innovate on, and we need to be able to share as well. We need to be able to recognize and reward. So reward, I don't necessarily mean financial rewards. Has but how do you recognize the contribution take the average teacher? So these systems of recognition, I think, is again something that I would strongly encourage that we discuss and deliberate upon. So these are a few points. I mean, there's a long list of things that I have, which are, nitty-gritty kinds of things. But at a broad level, I think it is about creating an environment for excellence. Yes, one more point I wanted to make to all of you. In the vision document, and we will have, I presume, a more detailed discussion on this, but we speak rightfully so about access and equity to education. And while access and equity is extremely important, what I would say is that we keep a high level of benchmark for the state in terms of educational quality, performance, etc. But at the same time, above that, you should have a set of institutions that will cater to excellence on a merit basis, not on a ability to pay basis. So very, very important considerations, but very important that you also have a differentiation and you have a way by which you create this competitive pressure that would lead to excellence at a faculty level, at an institution level, and of course at a state level. Let me stop there, Shanti, and if there's anything, I'm happy to respond very quickly. Morning. Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, we are definitely looking at a much more open book, open source kinds of examination. We are also trying to see, I mean, there are a couple of distance learning programs that we have on how we convert that entire evaluation to an online form, and I'm happy to share details with you on that. We are also looking at, because there is a recognition that also because we are only a master's and PhD program at the master's level in particular, we recognize the need for retraining a lot of people that have gone through education programs already in the niche areas that we are dealing with. So we are also recognizing the need for flexibility in the framing of programs and then, of course, the evaluation part of it. So take, for example, I'm just going to give you a quick example. There is an MBA infrastructure program that we have been running for the last several years. This year, we have sat back to evaluate how can we improve and make this much more attractive. Who's going to be our input students so that we are able to bring about a quick change also in the economy. And infrastructure, as you know, is one of the critical areas for development for India. So we looked at what is it that this program has, and I'm happy to share again the outline of that just for purposes of recognizing, how we have looked at curriculum and the innovations that we're bringing in curriculum. So we have from the beginning followed a semester system. Now what we have done is we have split the semester into two parts, into two modules, and recognizing the kinds of people that are already engaged in the infrastructure sector, and if we want to bring them to sustainable infrastructure, what is it additional that they need to understand in terms of de-risking projects, in terms of financial structuring, in terms of regulatory developments. We now have public-private partnerships that are coming up in the market. We have new regulatory systems that are in place. So 6-7 week modules that reflect the kinds of core expertise that a mid-career person would like to have, which is also relevant for a fresh graduate that might want to come into a postgraduate program. So for the fresh graduate, there are an additional set of courses. For the mid-career person, it is a very, very different approach. And how do we blend this together? And then how do you evaluate the performance of these people for a fresh graduate? And sorry to be somewhat different. In the case of a mid-career person, you might want to look at how do you pick up a live project and convert it with all the elements that we are talking about to make it successful. Because a single element An engineering solution by itself is not going to be successful. An economic solution by itself is not going to be successful. You need to be, if you talk about a wonderful nuclear power plant, but then the community is going to object to it and not allow it to happen, and you have cost and time overruns, then the project becomes unviable. All of these have to work in tandem, and this infrastructure manager that is looking at a sustainable infrastructure project has to understand all the dimensions that are going to make that project successful. So our evaluation of this person would not necessarily be from understanding, by rote learning of what a particular management technique might talk about, but might be around the project. I'm just giving this as an example. Different programs have developed their own evaluation structures depending on what is it that we are talking about. So that flexibility is again something that we have given to the faculty members for that particular